the relevance of the control of the function of environmental protection. We tell the people who are online, we are about to start in 2 more minutes, please.
Bueno, muy buenos días a todos. Les damos un saludo muy especial.
Good morning, everyone. We welcome especially those who join us today and those who join us in the room at the General Comptrollers of the Republic Central Office. To offer the word to Loreto Valenzuela, Chief of the Work of the General Comptroller's Office, who will lead the webinar. Good morning, everyone, and to all who are present, and especially words to the authorities who join us today, where we formally close this process of our coordinated audits on governance for managing passive assets of mining runoff, and specifically the environmental aspects to treat these environmental mining assets, passive assets. We want to greet Mr. Comptroller, Mr. Jorge Bermúdez Sotos, and the authorities who join us, Mr. Javier Naranjo, Subsecretary of the Environment, Cristóbal de la Maza, Mr. Herman Brígid, Executive Director of the Environmental Evaluation, Mr. Domeyko, the National Director of Cercanín, Vice President of the National Mining Company, and also whom joins us in representation of GIS and the other authorities and present authorities of the General Comptroller's Office, and also the entities who have joined these authorities. And also especially we wish to greet all those who join us digitally, and especially to the authorities and the teams of the superior auditing entities that join us, especially the Argentinian and the Honorable Comptroller of Buenos Aires and of Bolivia, of the Brazilian Union Accountability, State of Bahia, also our General Comptroller's Office, whom is present, also the General Comptroller's Office of Colombia, of Ecuador State, of the Republic of El Salvador, from the General Comptroller of Accounts of the Republic of Guatemala, the Higher Tribunal of Honduras, of the Higher Authority of the Federation of Mexico, from the General Comptroller of Peru, and from the Chamber of Accounts of the Dominican Republic. To all whom are present, thank you very much for joining us today on this important closing and mark of this process that has taken since 2019 to date. We wish now to offer the floor to the General Comptroller of the Republic of Chile. Mr. Comptroller, welcome. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us in these activities. I wish to greet everyone who is here present. It's good to be able to have physical activities again. I want to also make note that we've all cared for all of the protocols of sanitary intent. So we've dared to do this event in a hybrid character. I also wish to greet the authorities who join us. Thank you very much for those who were mentioned, and also whom join us on the panel, Ashim, Benjamin, and Loreto, for being here. And I also wish to greet our colleagues from the different higher SFCS that form part of the activity, which were part of the coordinated audit, whose results we are showing internationally. This is an event not only for Chile, but as you've seen also, in the number of people whom are adding to the list, 12 higher monitoring entities, and also 2 entities which are regional of some of these states. So for us, as a comptroller and as the presidents of the Public Works Office, which is a Latin American work that made part of the Latin American Organization of Higher Fiscalization Entities, OLACEFS, we as Comptroller's Office would preside the group and the last 4 years corresponded to bring forth these activities and coordinate the audit. For us, it has been a reason of great pride. And it is the last activity of the group because as work group, it had a expiration date and it is expiring. This audit, which we are presenting today, this coordinated audit, because it is an audit for those who know, has been carried out in 12 different countries of the region, is an audit that had difficulties since the beginning, because as Loretos pointed out, had to face a challenge of being done during the pandemic. So an audit that had been thought of, designed and planned to have activities carried out, for example, for prepare and planning that, for example, would consider workshops that were to be in presence. And I remember in March of last year, with several days of anticipation, we had to suspend the workshop that had been precisely been scheduled because we reached full lockdown and could not carry it out in Chile. And this was a challenge, a logistic challenge. Initially, there was a team that had to take charge and try to transfer the audit to what the pandemic was imposing upon us, and also try to bring forth the presence activities, the physical activities of auditing and supervision, which first mean breaking the barrier of the fear before leaving into the field, and a psychological element, and also was a sanitary challenge, which in time could be better managed, and we didn't have any inconveniences to bring forth and carry out. Apart from this, what has to be considered is that this is an audit on a subject that is very transcendental for all countries who make part of the coordinated audits, and Chile. Chile, whom defines as a country where the mining activity is so relevant, evidently to carry out an audit on what a structure of governance is about or how to manage environmental mining passive assets is something that should interest us to have quality information. And this is what I wish to talk about today, about having quality, objective information of no part for decision making and help managing specifically this subject. To do this, we have several allies, and I wish to note the collaboration that we've had since the beginning of the audit on a larger project, which is the cooperation that is through the German cooperative GIZ that has supported us since the beginning and is marked in the strengthening with the external control of other controllers and environmental issues. This audit, as I've said then, that this activity, this mining activity refers to, which is relevant for all countries, as we will see next, has several findings that should help us further as a government to make some management decisions. From first place, the definition of PAM, or environmental mining liability, it's inventory. Even though there's no information, it should be used information to public policies that may assume the management of these liabilities, but to avoid the other political decisions like the location of dwellings or construction areas or green areas not be affected by these environmental liabilities. So these definitions, starting from the audit, will be able to be made because here we will have information that will be of use to specifically do this management, which sometimes is lacking on the government's behalf, which are the findings of a coordinated audit. There are some countries in the region that are more advanced than others. There are countries that effectively are capable of extracting good governance and management practices that could possibly help us. The case for Peru, through their own law on liability management, and also the company that dedicate themselves to remediation of environmental mining liabilities, which is something that can be done to advance in the management of this effect, this undesired effect, and its historical effect of such an important activity that should be carried out, obviously, in a sustainable fashion. I do not want to extend myself much because we have to listen to our panel today and the presentation of the audits. I also wish to point out that everyone has received, and while we will also make our colleagues receive, this card, which has a QR code on, it is a paperless audit. It is only digitally supported. This is the only paper available. That's why I brought an iPad and not a full folder of printed papers. But it's difficult to get used to. Here we have the audits. Here we have the summary with the main findings, and from here we can reach the complete audit. Thus, I invite everyone, especially to virtually participate, to have the QR code we will make available. If it is not made yet, we will immediately make it available so that you can obtain the report. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, our panel. Thanks to those whom are in presence and almost 170 people whom are following us online. Thank you very much.
Por años, la actividad
For
minera
years, mining activities in Latin America and the Caribbean has generated mining environmental liabilities like stopped projects, abandoned mines, residues, and deposits that constitute a risk for life, health, and safety of people and the environment. Among 2019 to 2021, the work group of public works audits of OLACEFS with support of GIZ did a coordinated audit in governance structures for integrated management of environmental liabilities with a goal to regionally assess the comprehensive management of these. In this challenge, 14 auditing entities participated with working on their own national audits, did a common goal, having the ESGs 12 and 15. After hard work in context marked by 2019 pandemic, we present the following results. These are an invisibilized problem without inventory, risk assessment, nor prioritization of treatment or remediation. They are not being considered in the agendas of the countries. There are no public policies that allow to correct the issue. In general, the idea lacks a legal framework and definitions regarding their corrective management. There are no indicators for recovering environmental conditions or low risk conditions, except Peru, Ecuador, and Mexico, where there are corrective measures. Public policies and existing instruments are oriented towards prevention, but not to offer solutions to existing liabilities. No resources. Only Peru offers specified budgets for remediation of these liabilities. A vulnerable population is most affected. There are no strategies on contingency plans, emergencies, or disasters related to the liabilities, increasing the problem in vulnerable sectors. No citizens' participation. The mechanisms of citizens' participation are weak and inefficient, and people cannot access quality information nor propose solutions. No efficient, efficacious, or economic action. No instruments of general character are used to generate coordinated actions. Thus, these are isolated actions without planning nor focus on the risk. A complete installation of the 2030 agenda. States don't have indicators that establish a link of the goals of the agenda with reality, nor the needs of the territories related to these. To overcome this reality, we recommend governments to generate instruments to consolidate the concept of these liabilities and generate coordinated, integrated activities to integrate or eliminate significant risks. Define policies and national, local strategies with goals to mid and long term. Strengthen mechanisms oriented to following the ESGs through the establishment of specified and local indicators associated to the problems of the territories and their communities to generate regulatory frameworks for liability management, defining standards of regeneration for the impacted environmental components, to assign specific resources for the management, develop inventory of the liabilities present in the territory, assessing the risk and prioritizing urgencies. The implementation of these and other recommendations will allow to identify and decrease risks that communities face, strengthening government's role in the protection of people and the environment.
Going to continue with the conversation, but we apologize because we had a technical issue with the broadcasting of the video, but we are going to continue now. I think that the video, it is in the YouTube channel of OLACEFS and also in the website of the page of this event. So it is ready for everyone to continue with the presentation of Mrs. Rosa Maria. She's doctor in environmental risks, and thank you for being here with us. We are already looking at this, but the video, it's going to be presented at the end when we finish the session. But Rosa, it is accompanying us from Mexico, so thank you for your availability. She collaborates in the Engineering University Institute in the National Autonomous University of Mexico. She works in human and environmental health. She has been the president, the chair of the RICS Association in Latin America, and we had opportunities to share before. So she can be with us. She has been working with us in this auditing process. She is also in charge of also working with the environmental hydraulics and also responsible of the UNAP Department of Hydrology. So Rosa Maria Flores, this is your mic. You have 15 minutes. Thank you very much for the invitation to this event. Greetings everyone, to the authorities, the Comptrollership's office, everyone in the office that are with us face to face and remotely. I'm really regret not being able to be there with you, but I will start sharing my screen to start. Can you see it? Can you see my screen? Yes, we can see perfectly. Well, I am happy that you have shown a little bit of the video because it is really good, very, very good of what it is related to what we're going to say now. Let's talk about the mining environmental liabilities and its relation to the environmental damage. We can see that the environmental damage is the degradation. It is because of the materials and waste that are dangerous. And this originates a situation that it is risky. In this slide, we can see that these goods are actually the origins of the contaminated sites. One, it is the environmental emergencies that are sudden events that need that can be due because accidents, leakages, or fires. And if we have this situation and this is not dealt properly and you just leave it there, this turns out to be an MEL. So I can show you also the mining environmental liabilities that it is other kind of the liabilities and that it is from hydrocarbons. And in the blue box, some authors say that there are other kinds of environmental availabilities that is not related to hazardous materials, but also can be related to the degradation of the forest by other reasons, for example, plastic in the bed or funneled forest. The MELs, in general, they have main characteristics that are related to metallurgic or mining industries. They cause damage to the environment, the flora, fauna. You can have hazardous waste, affects different kinds of facilities, and it has been happening for a long time. And many times you don't even know what it is the origin of the contamination or the degradation or
el Estado el que atienda esta responsabilidad. Hay situaciones de riesgos asociadas a esta actividad y también hay una responsabilidad objetiva en su atención que obliga a hacer la reparación o la remediación del daño. Lo que vemos aquí es el resultado de la auditoría, un resumen, que es una herramienta estupenda que hicieron y me parece muy apropiado el nombre coloquial que se le ha dado, que es el genoma de los residuos, de los pasivos ambientales mineros. Lo traje a colación para que veamos que la gestión de los sitios contaminados, y como ya lo mencionó el señor Contralor, es algo per se muy difícil, es un gran reto. La misma definición de pasivo ambiental minero puede ser un reto, homologar los criterios y la misma gestión de los pasivos. Acá lo que vemos, les llamo la atención a este recuadro amarillo que vemos en primer lugar. Se refiere a una de las preguntas, se hicieron en general creo que 120 preguntas o alrededor de este número, y si uno se posiciona en esta herramienta, resultado de la auditoría en cada una de las celditas, lo que se observa es la pregunta que se hizo, la respuesta que dieron los diferentes países, y las respuestas se clasificaron por códigos de colores, como se ve acá, con un avance completo, mayor, menor o sin avance. Y yo en el recuadro acá amarillo, la pregunta que está ahí reflejada, que no se ve ahorita en pantalla, es si las entidades o los países tienen una normativa referente a pasivos ambientales, y se observa que acá en las flechitas que les puse del lado izquierdo, son 6 países los que respondieron que sí. La siguiente pregunta en la que llamó la atención de lo que resultó de la auditoría es si esta normativa refiere a la definición de pasivo ambiental, y vemos que entonces ya solo son 5 países los que tienen esta definición. Y la siguiente pregunta en la que llamó la atención es si tienen ya una definición en particular de lo que es un pasivo ambiental minero. Y vemos que entonces la cosa se complica más y solo son 2 países los que contemplan esta definición. Como ven, esta herramienta, que de verdad los felicito calurosamente por el resultado obtenido, es una excelente herramienta para poder hacer como un diagnóstico o conocer el diagnóstico rápido de todos los países en los diferentes rubros que abarcó la auditoría. Entonces, vemos que la definición del pasivo ambiental minero pues es muy variada. Acá vemos algunas de las definiciones, no voy a detenerme a leerlas, ustedes lo pueden hacer. Y tienen más o menos los mismos elementos con algunas diferencias, y lo que quiero llamar su atención es lo que marqué aquí en rojo, que lo que todas tienen en común es la mención de que las afectaciones que derivan en un riesgo potencial, un riesgo permanente, un riesgo inminente. Por lo que el concepto de evaluación de riesgo ambiental es muy importante cuando hablamos de pasivos ambientales mineros. En esta lámina lo que yo les muestro es, en general, en los sitios mineros, qué tipos de riesgos se pueden presentar. Las fuentes de riesgo pueden ser de origen natural, como vemos acá del lado izquierdo, o bien por la misma operación de las minas. Y lo que les marqué acá es que todo deriva en los principales tipos de riesgos que...
And what we have, the main kinds of risks actually are with adverse effects. We can have geological effects and different other sources, depending also of the sites and kinds of materials that are handled. and also chronicle exposition of the people or communities to these materials. The consequences from these risks that are not handled or managed appropriately, it has to be related to a very big number, and the economic expenses can be high and also involving life and death situations. The best tool to prevent this situation, it is prevention. This prevention actually, it is totally proved that the costs can be reduced substantially once we are dealing with the areas that are contaminated with this prevention focus. Now, when we talk about the contaminated sites and the environmental risk assessment, here we see the management and the management of the contaminated sites in general. We started from the particularly contaminated sites. You have a characterization of the area to know what it is, the contaminant type and the concentration of each of them. And then you compare with the maximum permitted limit according to the regulation, and to see if it can be cleaned up, and then they decide on the process of remediation or cleanup of the site, and then to get to the goals of the remediation, the goal has to be under the maximum permitted limit. But if for any reason that you cannot achieve this, you can use the environmental risk assessment that has more specific solutions and options. And in this way, the levels of remediation or remedy that you have to achieve, it has to be specified in the environmental risk assessment. If you achieve these levels, it is said that the site can be used. Otherwise, it has to continue with the remedy process. So we see that this assessment, it is an important part of the contaminated sites. In particular, the environmental risk assessment has some challenges. In the mining industry case, the options and the timeline, it's very long and can be for decades or centuries, and it is difficult to know what it is the reason of the contamination, one specific mining industry or some other environmental factors. But Dr. Margarita Gutierrez ran an research and a study of the deep levels and deep areas of mining sectors. And they just look at different factors to find one that it was highlighted. Other option, it is just to look at different areas and see here, it's just an example. You can see how the rivers are affected over time in a time scale where they had a copper assets solution. So they had a question about the effects of and the consequences of this leakage, or was because of this leakage, and actually they compared it with their basing, with the geological components that were similar, so they can compare if this was the only reason for the environmental changes in the basing. Another thing that it is something interesting and a challenge that we can have different predictor agents of stress. The challenge it is to be able to figure it out, what is the specific cause of this damage. Is it possible to make this differentiation right? Yes, it is possible. The same example, in the same area we have agricultural and livestock production, and also we had effects into the urban population, and the methodologies that we can use to figure this out, it is one of the most important, or the one that I think it is more suitable, the balanced network, so we can establish cause and effect consequences, so we have a better result and more detailed. And now the remedy of the different situations, or the cleanup, this is a general scheme. Of course, we start by defining the objectives of the remediation or the cleanup process. This is the main process, and according to the legislation, regulation, and everything, and also taking into account the maximum permitted, limited, or the risk situations that are included in the regulation. We also have other actors that we have to consider, for example, the expectations, politics in the company, society, communities, and then we have to select the technology of remediation or cleanup. We have to consider things like the approval, if we have already had the approval of this technology that we want to use, if it is suitable for the concentration and the kind of contaminant that you are facing. And of course, if it is inside of the budget that it is allocated for this. To achieve to this number, what we have to do, if you have more than one site, you have to do the proper management and organization. And many times this definition has to be done in regards to the human health or environment in the area, or also the combination of all these risks. So according to this evaluation, we have to decide what are the sites that we have to deal with first, or if not at all. So another thing that we have to take into consideration to choose the remedy technology, it is something that has to be sustainable, green, and also with social justice, because some of the technologies of remediation, that ones that I just mentioned, that are applicable to the mining industry, it is also important to consider the international elements that we have. I emphasize the Escazú agreement that was signed by the countries in the region, and we have to continue and follow these international agreements, of course. Finally, we have to consider, and this is food for thought, some areas to consider the management for the mining environmental liabilities. In general, the pandemic of COVID-19 that was still here, a little bit more under control, but the thing is that the mining exploring declined, but not to the levels that we had in 2016. And this is in the perspective of under pandemic. But we need to see that this is faster than expected. Maybe the sector is not prepared with the compatible practices. So we also see that the big companies are the ones that are leading the mining exports. And we have to wonder if we have this greater capacity of exhaustion of the products, and if maybe these companies have more green practices and respect of the interested stakeholders. So over the years, we have seen that Latin America continues to be the preferred destination for mining exploring processes. And also we have to take care that this doesn't bring along an accelerated degradation of the resources that we have, and how we are going to be affecting the more vulnerable communities and environments. So thank you very much for the invitation. That is all my presentation.
Muchísimas gracias, Rosa María.
Thank you, Rosa Maria. Thank you for your presentation. And in particular, what you just have said about this topic, and thank you for the company, because it is important to say that you have been with us with the planning of this audit, in the workshops on the organization and the consolidation, and also now in the diffusion or the broadcasting of the results. So thank you for that. Thank you now for being here and reminding us the importance of the prevention and of the adoption of the remedy and cleanup processes. And those are part of the challenges that we have in the region. So after listening to you, we are going to welcome Benjamin Reyes Riasco, an environmental engineer. Also, he has studied in the University of Santiago of Chile since 2014. He has been working with us. We have the privilege to have him as a colleague. And he is going to talk about the main results and findings about this coordinated audit, and also about the main recommendations that this audit generated. So Benjamin, you have the floor. Hi everyone, especially the authorities that are here today. This is the perfect moment for saying thank you to the Controller's Office for the help, the support, and the different authorities and entities that were audited. In the case of Chilean audit, we also have to mention and say that it was a common comment that many auditors made. There was a lot of collaboration. And of course, this is the right opportunity to say thank you and to greet everyone that is here today and the ones that are connected as well. And also to mention particularly the group of auditors that participated in the different 14 entities or departments in different regions, 60 auditors, and no question that the Controller said something about the challenges of the process. And of course, there is a trait of this job that it is the different auditors were related to the innovation in the framework of audits, and there are different good examples in the different audit processes that were done. So congratulations to the different auditors.
Intentaremos ser breve, ¿cierto?
This is the subject of the presentation. We will try to be brief. What's important to be noted? There's a methodological characteristic of the process that the Comptroller said, that Dr. Rosa Maria has said, and it's regarding the technical difficulty, the evident technical difficulty that had the auditing. And thus, one of the main goals of the process was to generate this common language among the auditing entities that participate, trying to unify the technical development that the expert community has executed, represented today here, but who have joined us in the process. Unfortunately, this common language built, and one of the goals was, and I wish to show you in this opportunity. Additionally, to note that the focus of these results that we wish to make known are marked in a netly regional focus, and how these types of projects have that focus. The 2030 goal says not leaving anyone behind. We have experience here that's close to with the German cooperation that said support is generated and development has to be homogeneous in the region. That's what we're looking for. Having said this, one of the characteristics associated to the methodological history that the auditing had, and I explained to develop this common language, is linked to one of the goals that the coordinated audits had, and this is an acquired experience in the framework of said, and it has to do with development of knowledge. This instance also meant a training instance, first among ourselves, the auditors, and also there's added value here that's worth noting. Regarding what was the subject of analysis of the audits, the Comptroller did mention its name, this assessment on governance structures for managing environmental mining liabilities. And here we show and wish to scheme a key concept in these goals of generating a common language. And this concept was called the comprehensive management of the mining environmental liabilities. This comprehensive management was development of several actions and different subjects of analysis that has mainly been defined by the expert community. For example, here I also appreciate CEPAL, Mauricio Pereira, whom is present, whom joined us in the process, and we've been able to know how the expert community, together with public entities, have configured this optimum standard for managing these mining liabilities. That's what we call a comprehensive analysis. There are two areas of analysis: governance and thinking of different norms, development in each of the countries, and there are differences in conceptualization of the PAM concept. Thus, in some occasion, we might find potentially contaminated sites, areas for management, etc. So, more than having a specific regulatory framework is to see how the governance was in the subject. And on the right of the graph, if I'm not mistaken, we have the aspects related to the corrective management, which was one of the main focuses of development executed, where we saw that it is necessary and urgent to generate and stimulate, as we called, management in the mining liabilities that are present in the territory and have direct adherence on risk development, which is often unknown in the populations. This unknown risk, I wish to note, like this last week at the seminar of the ESGs, we talked of precautionary success, and this was present in all of these audits. Having said this methodological history, what we wish to represent, like as so on the slide, the initial assessment or the initial diagnosis showed to us, starting from the investigation of the auditors, is that the presence of mining environmental liabilities is an existent condition for all the region. The majority of the countries of the region, with their variability regarding participation of mining in their national economies, but independently, there is a presence of these liabilities. Thus, risk exists. It's focus that we had to keep very present, since this doesn't determine the focus of the audit. We're not considering ourselves a risk. The risk that these structures create on population, more than just the participation of mining on local economies. Thus, we wish to also reference this slide to the group of auditors and how the methodological work was developed mainly with these virtual tools. Unfortunately, we could broaden the participation starting from previous cases. We were able to take a lot of data and opinion, thus repeating the greetings of all of the colleagues of the region. In these meetings, one of the main goals was to agree of what was going to be understood as mining environmental liability. On the screen, it's seen here, and Dr. Rosa Maria mentioned the different conceptualizations according to different countries, but in this concept that had been agreed upon by different auditors, we maintain this importance regarding the condition of risk that these structures generate without responsibility and of difficult management. What's interesting is that this concept, we could go to the different countries and subnational units and develop audits that would talk among each other, and it allow us to have a consolidation of results. Thus, the invitation also we wish to be emphatic is that reading the results of audits be done together with these local reports, and these are present and have been developed by each of the auditing teams. Thus, based upon preliminary analysis, we were able to cover some information. These are the three main ideas which are not new, since evidently the presence of these liabilities, environmental liabilities, is a condition represented in all the region. We know that the availability of regulatory framework is precarious. There's no development regarding about this, and there's also a condition of risk, and the image here is quite eloquent of when there's an interaction of many populations with these types of contaminating structures, that it is a condition that has to be tended, and thus we wish to mention a development and a focus of results on behalf of the work group, which we've called like looking for common findings and transforming conditions, because evidently it is a situation that has not been tended in the region, and we wish to note. Regarding the results, and now going fully into some information that the video showed us, what under this graph is represented in the consolidated report, and there's a summary made upon the different analysis carried out. What are the aspects that we wish to note? First, the Comptroller also mentioned that we consider these goals in the context of crisis. This management and governance had to be relieved in this context due to its complexity. Thus, we understand that the environmental external control in environmental subjects become important. Having said this, there is mainly a gap that appears regarding the 100%, which represents the comprehensive management of mining assets. We can see the levels for development all under 50%. And we can also mention, in this case, what conditioned the development of these higher percentages, mainly associated to regulatory framework, and we've called this the regulatory framework. We have norms of general character, which establish competencies, similar competencies, but given some capacity to manage the subject, not necessarily as a PAM, as previously said. We also mentioned that there are noted cases. We have Ecuador and Mexico with interesting tools that appear where we can stimulate management. And I wish also to note the case here of Ecuador, where starting from their constitutional norms, a subsidiary role of the government established in an occasion where there are no responsible parties, when there are mining liabilities. This generates different activities of the public entities. However, there are observations associated to the implementation of these instruments. But in a context of constitutional debate that is being carried out of the country, this example becomes very interesting. And also, going more into more specific subjects, and also connecting to the previous slide, what happens here in first case is that the general regulatory frameworks do not help us solve these issues. Why? Because there are two large aspects. First is that we have to know of in detail of the existence and magnitude of this environmental issue. This is after a study, and also to assign clear responsibility and resources. Thus, this regulatory framework has to be brought down to earth. Now, at a regional level, also mentioned by Dr. Rosa Maria, at a regional level, the managing these environmental liabilities is more focused on prevention today, which is important to note. However, it is necessary to develop tools for corrective management of these environmental liabilities. Regarding prevention, we have interesting cases like El Salvador, where there is a law of prohibition of mining activities, which talk of the generation of contaminants done in the past. So an interesting mechanism, and also mention the Buenos Aires case, where having a general regulatory framework associated to closing mining projects, there is a law that has been, which are the main mechanisms in prevention. At the bottom of the slide, there is a reference to this exception. given by these three countries, Mexico, Ecuador, and Peru, where Peru, with its 28271 law, establishes a framework that directly attends this issue of mining environmental liabilities, where we've been able to evidence deficiency in its implementation, and this is described in the documents of the local audits of these superior fiscalization entities. Regarding planning and the generation of national strategies, the generalized condition at a regional level is of the absence of these strategies, and we wish also to note a very important aspect that was assessed very specifically in the audits, and it's how countries and governments subject to monitoring, auditing are submitted to these contingency plans. The generalized condition in the absence of these types of instruments. Here is the case.
Que se han realizado. También, uno de los
Sorry, technical difficulties. Also, an important background is associated to the deficiencies that exist regarding citizens' participation, regarding managing these environmental liabilities. Important development was observed regarding legislation associated to access and transparency information. However, it's not being applied for management associated to mining assets.
un rasgo muy importante, haciendo mención
An
también
important characteristic of this, mentioning international agreements that are stimulating development in the subject. Today, there is no correct implementation of these instruments, since we wish to mention, for example,
una estructura bien desarrollada,
the case of Peru, which has a developed structure and having clear instruments for participation and having clear instruments for citizen participations are not being applied in a large percentage in these remediation projects. The aspects related to the 2030 agenda, we saw also at a regional level that unfortunately the 2030 agenda implementation is not linked to the development of these mining liabilities. This is what we wish to note with our different work, and we saw that the 2030 agenda is generator of different actions. Thus, it's important to insert the activities to be developed there during the 2030 agenda. Dr. Rosa Maria also mentions the importance of a specific regulatory framework. In this case, accepting the case that we've indicated to her, there is no specific regulation on the subject, and this we wish to concentrate on an aspect which are the most impactful and wish to express as so. The norm, where we define specific standards of regeneration of these liabilities, are not defined, and also technical information related to the tolerable risk to the population. And this is an average that Dr. Rosa Maria shows us that's complex to be done. So we need instruments that define this history. And finally, we wish to develop and express it as the main finding is that looking for the consequence that the lack of legislation and strategy has, definitely we see that it is an invisibilized issue at a regional level, and our task as a superior audit entity is that this subject appear in the national and subnational agenda. Some important background information that we want to make more precise. The Comptroller also mentioned the card that we were able to offer here in our audience. This gives us and allows us to enter a document that we've generated and look for where the audience enter and is able to have access of a more specific audit. And also to note where the consolidated report is at, and also to mention the assessment instrument, which is our scheme that we have here. And here the goal, the complex goal here is that we wanted to go in and show a bit how to navigate the instrument. This is an assessment instrument that I appreciate, and will make appreciations to the data analysis unit whom supported us in the beginning in generating an instrument where citizens mainly and interested actors of public entities are able to access information and mainly do a self-guided reading of the results, not something as schematic that something a report can give us. We believe this is a tool that can give us this option. And giving a very brief explanation so that you can access the information you wish, and we can divide it into 3 blocks. First, we refer to the mechanisms for management, which are these actions defined in the comprehensive management of the environmental liabilities through questions which are quite schematic of the subject to be analyzed. By clicking the subject to be analyzed, you will be able to have more specific data associated to how the region is behaving regarding said variable. Then, and we will activate it, then we have a second block presented where we are able to have access to the general conclusions of the auditing process, where we did specific differentiations. Dr. Rosa Maria also mentions the availability of the concept of environmental liability of this case, and we can recognize what is the development of each of the countries, and also with this graph that help us to territorially define at a region. We then have a summary which expresses the subjects that were analyzed in the process, together with noting several landmarks that we believe important, like environmental legislation, which is an instrument that is present in the majority of countries and also in the region, and are the landmarks that we understand that stimulate these goals. To go to the last block then, this is the block, and the doctor eliminated it as so, and will continue to go as the genoma of the environmental mining liabilities of the region, because there's a lot of information. What's interesting here, we can first obtain a ranking in the development that countries have regarding the comprehensive management of these environmental liabilities. Peru does not appear with its legislation and different actions. And what we wish to note, this is mainly has a use on behalf of us as superior auditing entities, where we can, depending on the country we're at, evidence quickly where our gray sectors are at.
From there, we can start with the identification of the factors so we can see what it is more delicate. Besides, in this framework of coordinated audits, so we have different projections to know what are we going to be focused on and to follow up the results. What do we want to highlight from here? As the main focus, we are going to have a difference between the different levels of gray that are the empty places, the empty areas that we have at the regional level. And in this case, we want to highlight this area here. Maybe if you see here, it is related to the identification and increase of the MELs. And these mechanisms are defining the general common management. And as the starting point, we can generate and identify this inventory. So from the different auditors, we have different challenges to follow up this process related to these activities or others. So we are going to make this tool available. And with this, I finish the presentation. With the recommendations, I would like to highlight or to continue by saying these recommendations has a regional focus with a transforming character. And so we can have this inventory and it can be developed, these studies in a regional area. Of course, what are the risks of the mining environmental liabilities? And then from there, starting the prioritization and the assessment of these risks. And also, it is related to the efficient use of the resources. And then we have the generation of the instruments that are actually focused in the total risks and the remedy standards, and also the definition of different strategies in the medium and long terms. And it is important also to say we have to strengthen the access to these information, so the results are going to be made available, so you can of course try to have some time to check it out. And of course, thank you to the whole working team, the team with the controllership's office and everyone. Thank you for participating and making this possible. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Benjamin. The instrument, actually, it is, I would like to make some kind of a synthesis or a summary of the work, because there was a lot of work done jointly, and we had the technical material, but they did the magic, you know. So thank you very much. I believe that that represents the dedication, the effort, and that also allows to focus to the relevant and essential information. So in the country, we also have some things that where we have opportunities to improve. Now I have the pleasure to introduce Ashim Constantine, because he is going to comment on the results of the audit. He is going to join us for some conclusions. He is the director of the project from the program of the Germany cooperation with the regional cooperation for the sustainable management of the mining resources in the Andean countries. Also, he has a degree from Austria University. He has a specialization in hydrochemistry and remediation of contaminated sites. He has worked through the international German cooperation with different areas in the environmental areas in Peru, and supported the creation also of different surveying and assessment of contaminated sites. And also he works in the MINSUS. So it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for being here, and please, Loreto, in behalf of the institute that I work for, I would like to say thank you to the controllership's office in Chile for the management. Organizers and the people working in the audit, thank you for the great job that you have done. And actually, I was here from the very beginning of the process, and we have supported and funded some of the technical workshops that have done in the framework of that audit. That's why I know that it hasn't been really easy to deal with this, to tackle this issue, because it's a highly complex issue. It is involving management, social aspect, economical aspect, and also the nature of the matrix of the assessment actually that has to be dealt with. It is so diverse in terms of topics. So there is no doubt that the data that was raised in this survey, it is really useful for the public entities of the region, but also for the technical, scientific world and social and civil society as well. So on the other hand, we also have to acknowledge the great achievement of the different audit teams that overcome this challenge of performing this audit in the difficult circumstances of the pandemic. And the controller already said this at the beginning, to change the way of performing the audit. audit in the digital world. So the collaborators, I was amazed how they did this change to make possible the audit in a different and very professional way, to see something that done something, to have seen how they did this that hasn't been done before. So it's amazing. And the platform that Benjamin said and showed just a few minutes ago, it is amazing. I had the opportunity to work with it, and I recommend to everyone here to use that website, because it is a source of information that is quite important. The presentation of the results is really clear as well. So even though it is a lot of information, as you can see, you don't get lost in the site, because it is a platform that invites you to get deep and to dive into data. So as I have less than 10 minutes to comment the results of the audit, honestly, there were a lot of findings that are worth to mention, but because of the time, I will talk about three of the results that I particularly think that are more important. The public policies and the instruments that we have are oriented to the prevention, but they don't deal with the, as we saw in the presentation, only Peru, Ecuador, and Mexico are the ones that have public policies related to the corrective actions itself or themselves. So it is important that the mining industries and these projects that are developed, they have to follow some security and safety parameters that avoid contamination. And as Rosa said, prevention, it's cheaper than correction, and those are interesting aspects. And also a little reference about our situation in Germany, to be aware that mediation, recovery, and passives liabilities have some limitations about the environmental quality you can achieve. So the remedy processes or the cleanup have to just establish safe situation, say the sites in safe areas, but they never come back to the full recovery. And in Germany, we have had a lot of these experiences, not only in the mining sector, but also the industrial one, particularly the underground waters. And I believe that at an international level, we can say that with the technical and economic factors, we can reduce the contamination in different levels of magnitude, that in very small cases, we get to diminish these concentrations in the underground water, so to the level that this water can be used again. So prevention is key to avoid the generation of these problems. We are talking about this as the mining industry already had some issues in some of the countries that participated in this audit. The problems are vary in different countries, because countries sometimes have the same mining history. Peru, for example, currently has about 9,000 liabilities, and Chile has an industry of wasteland of hundreds and that are donated, and they can be considered liabilities, and 500 of them are inactive. So in these countries where mining, it is an important factor in the national economy, we had this to consider. Also in the mining areas where you have a lot of mining liabilities, for example, Cajamarca in Peru, and also the population resistance to new mining projects, it is high. And it is understandable, of course, even for a foreigner like me, because they have already contaminated their area, but they have to avoid that situation again. So no doubt the environmental standards that we have today are better than the ones that we used to have, but this contaminated soil, it is a complicated issue to solve. So it is important. The factor of the reputation in the areas that were already affected is not only one factor that is involved in the correct management of environmental liabilities, particularly for the countries that want to get this mining license for future projects. The second also that I want to mention, it is related to the lack of resources to inventory the liabilities. Only Peru has the instrumental tools that are oriented to the mining environmental liabilities accounting. And actually, this is all belonging to the public sector. No privates are in charge of this. And it is not it's weird that because companies, they don't have enough financial resources to keep or to deal with this part of the work. So public money has to go into fixing or having the corrective actions for these sites. Likewise, we have to have into account that the projects of passive or liability remedy are quite expensive, and it's not strange that they are in thousands of millions of dollars. In Germany, we have a lot of examples about this whole mining that is a uranium mine. The costs are already reaching 6,000 million euros, and we are not yet there. So I think that we are going to invest even more money for the treatment of underground water. We're talking about internal passive liabilities or mining liabilities in Germany. So we know that this is going to take for more time, and the availability of the resources is just the neck of the bottle, because in Europe and other countries like Canada or Australia, we have state projects, and the mechanisms for funding that, it is really different. The time, it is not enough to mention a lot of examples, but in Australia, you have specific taxes for mining. So they have a state fund that it is going to be dedicated to the fixing of the remedy or the cleanup. In Germany also, we have a specific fund for the coal mines, and it has been co-funded by the federal government and the different states. Also, there are other examples that are relevant, but I cannot mention so far. Initiatives like for different industries of sectors that contribute voluntarily, different members of the industry, and independently, if they are legally the responsible of this, and else is just to improve the reputation of the sector. And the last point that I would like to mention, it is the finding of the citizens' participation. It has been really low in the region, and I believe that that is one of the learned lessons of many countries, because at the beginning, the focus to manage these liabilities, it is to look for different options to solve this problem, but the technique used to eliminate the risks for the health and the environment. However, in long term, it is easy to understand the environmental liability as a problem, but also we need to involve the citizens and the community that it is directly affected, so they can help us to identify the problems and also increase the social acceptance of this industry. Also, the mining industry has to be paying attention to the needs of the communities and the locations and the different areas in which we do have environmental liabilities. can be areas that can be turned into something different, like recreational areas. And then when we talk about the waste behind, we can have some materials that can be reused. And in that case, for this, sometimes you can use this as an opportunity to turn a problem into an opportunity, because we have had different management also for these tailings. And I think that it is important news in the region, that many countries in the region are already dealing with this, but also the audit showed that there are some very important aspects that are still pending in order to have a proper managing of the mining environmental liabilities. And I think that the result of this audit has been really clear, and the information represents an excellent situation. I mean, it is a very good idea to have this diagnosis, and the purpose it is that every country advances even more in this matter, and we hope that the support that we have provided with our project, it is going to contribute to the success of this idea, because we are really excited to continue working with you. And also I would like to say thank you again for the invitation and for working with us together. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your words. And to talk about the different findings and the main conclusions of the audit. So we value that you are here today, and the same as Rosa Maria, you have been with us for a long time. Your cooperation has been really valuable, and for us it's an important fact that you are here today with us. Thank you, everyone present here, for being here in the controllership's offices and also in the digital world. We also, and thank you to the controllership's office, because the controller has given me the final or the closing words. This audit has revealed some challenges that we have in Chile, and also common challenges that we have in the region. Some countries that have been particularly highlighted, like Peru or Ecuador, and some actions of Mexico, are better than in the other countries in terms of prevention, but we are still pending in different areas, remedy, cleanup, and so we have to be taking responsibility for these liabilities or these forgotten spaces and sites that are not only affecting the landscape, but also the underground waters, the quality of our soils, the air, the communities around them. So we have to take accountability for this and to make real changes to deal with it. And one of the main challenges is not only identify them, but also we have to adopt the different programs and policies that have to help us manage the situation, but also we have to allocate some resources, and we have a lot of challenges there. But all the advances that we can have in this area are going to come together for supporting the state to provide security and safety to the population, and to actually grant effectively the right to live in a clean environment. This has no frontiers or borders, but we also have to acknowledge that the contamination is affecting people in all levels, and the state it is responsible to help them. Today, we are just closing this coordinated structure about governance, liabilities. But to summarize this, we have created a website, and also we have a report available. You have the QR code, and also today we are finishing this work about the public policies of OLACEFS, and this task started 4 years ago. It has been an honor for us to lead this team of work and also to lead this coordinated audit alongside with the 12 countries that participated in the 14 FCS. And I invite you to read this report again, to share it, and to optimize the resources that are available for you. These conclusions were made in a very common language, a citizen language, and also we can have a democratization or democratic access to this. So thank you for everything. Thank you to the technical teams, everyone for joining us, all the technical participants, and also having finished, I will, now we are going to play the video. The video had an issue with the, we had an issue with the video, but the digital channel was broadcasting. So now the audio is recovered. Thank you very much, everyone, for being with us. Controller, Chief Office, everyone, Maria, and everyone that it is here. So we are going to have the video now.